All right, let's dive into global warming. You guys sent over a mountain of research on this, and just skimming through it, um, I'm seeing some pretty heavy stuff. So, is this all settled science now? Or is there still debate about what's really going on with global warming?
Well, there's always going to be research and debate in science.
Huh.
But the main idea of global warming, that we're causing the Earth to heat up,
Yeah.
that's pretty much settled. A lot of what you sent over, like that Mukapati article, it shows like actual temperature increases,
Yeah.
way more than you'd expect just from normal, ups and downs in the climate.
Okay, so it's definitely happening. But what I really got interested in were the consequences. Like, we all know it's getting hotter, but what does that actually mean? I mean, for us, for the planet.
That's where it gets really interesting. Because it's not just about a few degrees in the thermometer, right? Global warming is like this trigger for a whole chain of consequences. Like Mukapati talks about how much heat the oceans are
But
absorbing.
what if the oceans are getting warmer too? I didn't even think about that. How does that even work?
Well, think of the ocean like a giant, I guess, heat sink. It sucks up a ton of heat from the air. But that has big consequences. First, when water heats up, it expands, right? So sea levels rise. And then warmer water can't hold as much oxygen, which is bad news for, all the life in the ocean.
So we're talking rising sea levels that could displace people, ecosystems getting messed up.
Exactly, and it goes on from there. That same Mukapati article talks about coral reefs dying off. These reefs, they're like the rainforests of the ocean. Incredibly important.
Yeah, I read about that whole ecosystems collapsing. It's pretty scary. But I'm also seeing a lot about greenhouse gases. So can we break that down? Everyone talks about CO2, but what else is there?
Yeah, there's a bunch of greenhouse gases that contribute to warming. The main ones are, well, carbon dioxide or CO2, and you have methane, that's CH4, and then nitrous oxide, and these things called halocarbons. The Mukapati article does a good job explaining the basics.
Okay, and methane seems to be getting a lot of attention lately. Is it really worse than CO2?
It is, yeah, for a few reasons. Mukapati says it's like 20 times more effective at trapping heat. Part of it is the way the molecule is structured. And it doesn't hang around in the atmosphere as long as CO2. But while it's there, it reacts and forms ozone, which is another greenhouse gas. There's a paper from 2005 by Schindel. It goes deep into how methane affects things.
Wow. Okay, so methane is a big deal. But when we talk about these greenhouse gases, it's not just cars and factories, right? I mean, what other things are we doing that contribute to this?
You're right, it's bigger than just fossil fuels. Deforestation is a huge factor, and so is agriculture. Think about it. Trees absorb CO2, so when we cut them down, we're not just losing that absorption. The wood actually releases more CO2 as it decays. And agriculture, especially raising livestock, that produces a lot of methane. Ripa and Caprile, they wrote a paper that really gets into how land use affects greenhouse gases.
So it's a much bigger picture than just like tailpipe emissions. It's kind of starting to feel overwhelming. Like everything we do contributes to the problem. Is there even anything we can do to turn things around?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a ton of research going on right now looking at solutions, both for like slowing down the warming and adapting to what's already happening.
That's not a hopeless situation.
No, not at all. But we need to combine individual action with like policy changes.
Yeah.
And we need innovation too, new technologies.
Okay, let's get into all that. But first, I'm seeing some things in these articles about what the future might hold. Like, what are the actual projections scientists are making?
That's a great question. Let's talk about what we can expect down the road and what it means for the planet.
So before we got into all this, we were talking about how serious this global warming thing is, but you were saying it's not hopeless, and there's research on, what we can do. What are scientists saying about what might happen in the future, though? And the solutions, like, what are those looking like?
Right, so even if we stopped putting out all greenhouse gases today, right now, there's still warming that's going to happen. Like it's baked in because of what's already in the atmosphere. Projections are showing we could hit a 4 degree C temperature rise by 2100. And even if we take action right now, we're still probably looking at a 2 degree C rise, no way around it. Mukapati's article, it lays all this out, no sugarcoating.
4 degrees. Wow. That's a lot. What would that even do to the planet?
Well, pretty much everything gets affected. Weather patterns, sea levels, biodiversity, the whole shebang. We'd see more extreme weather, like heat waves that are way worse, droughts, floods. Hurricanes would probably get stronger too.
Yeah.
Coastal areas are going to have a tough time with the rising sea levels. And a lot of species, plants, and animals, they just won't be able to adapt that fast. So extinctions, yeah, that's on the table too. It's not a pretty picture if we don't get our act together.
That's pretty intense. And then on top of all that, I was reading about these natural things, El Nino and La Nina. How do those play into all this?
Oh yeah, El Nino and La Nina. Those are natural climate patterns. They happen in the Pacific Ocean.
Mm.
And they can really mess with weather all over the world. They're like part of the Earth's normal climate, variations. But here's the thing. Global warming can actually make them even worse.
Okay, to be honest, I don't really remember what those are. Can you, remind me what El Nino and La Nina are all about?
Sure. So basically, El Nino, that's when the water in the Pacific around the equator gets unusually warm. La Nina is the opposite. The water's colder than usual in that same area. And when the ocean temperature changes like that, it affects air circulation, which then changes how much rain there is and temperatures all over the globe.
So, like natural warming and cooling cycles?
Yeah, you could say that. But global warming messes with them, makes them more intense and harder to predict. So the planet's already warmer overall, right? That makes El Nino even hotter and La Nina even colder, and that leads to even more extreme weather.
Yikes. So it's like we're making the natural extremes even more extreme.
Exactly, and that's a big worry for climate scientists because it means it's even harder to know what's going to happen with the climate and how to prepare.
Okay, so we've got global warming that we're causing mixed with these natural cycles that are getting messed up. And it could all lead to some really bad stuff happening. Starting to feel like a runaway train, like we can't stop it. So what can we even do at this point? Does it even matter if I drive less or use reusable bags?
I hear you. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this. And yeah, individual actions, they do matter. They set an example and can lead to bigger changes. But to really tackle this, we need systemic change. We need policies that push for renewable energy like solar and wind. We need sustainable ways of farming, and we've got to use less energy overall. Basically, we have to move away from fossil fuels, the oil, coal, all that, and shift to a whole new kind of economy that's actually sustainable.
I see. So it's like individual actions are good, but they're not enough on their own.
All right, it's got to be bigger than that.
I'm looking at some of these articles. There's some interesting research on solutions. There's this one from 2022, Singh and others. They talk about using biomass for making iron, which is pretty cool. And a lot of them talk about how important technology is. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, technology is going to be crucial. We need to come up with new stuff, new ways to do things, to lower emissions, to capture and store carbon dioxide, and to adapt to the changes that are already happening.
So what kind of technologies are we talking about specifically?
Well, there's a lot of promising research in renewables, like I said, solar, wind, things like that. And then there's carbon capture and storage. That's where you capture the CO2 from power plants and factories. And then you store it underground so it's not in the atmosphere. There's this paper from way back in 2005 by Caldera and Wicked. They were already talking about that. That could be a big help in reducing our emissions.
That's pretty neat. But what about the changes that are already locked in, like you were saying? How do we adapt to those? What can we do to prepare?
Adaptation is key. Yeah, got to be ready for what's coming. We need to build things that can withstand extreme weather, like stronger buildings and infrastructure. We need crops that can handle droughts. And we need better systems for warning people about disasters, like floods and hurricanes, so people can get to safety.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. Reduce emissions to slow things down, and then adapt to the changes that are already going to happen.
Exactly. Got to do both.
And what about us, regular people? What can we do besides reusable bags and, turning off the lights? What can actually make a difference?
Well, every little bit helps, right? Being aware of what you're buying, where it comes from, how it's made, supporting companies that are trying to be sustainable, and speaking up, telling your representatives you want them to take action on climate change. All those things can have a ripple effect.
So it's not just about our own actions, but also about pushing for bigger changes, like through policy.
Exactly, yeah. Every action, every voice, it all adds up. Remember, we're all in this together. We're all on this planet. It's about demanding better from our leaders, supporting the scientists and innovators, and holding each other accountable for building a better future.
That's a lot to think about. It's definitely complicated, no easy answers. But hearing about all this research and the possible solutions, it does make me feel a little bit better. Before we wrap up, is there anything else our listeners should know about global warming? Any last thoughts or things they should think about?
We've talked about the science, the impact, the solutions, but there's one thing I think is really important to remember. Global warming, it's not just an environmental issue, it's a social justice issue too.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that. What do you mean by that?
Well, climate change, it doesn't affect everyone the same way. The people who have contributed the least to causing it, they're often the ones who get hit the hardest.
So you're saying the people who are least responsible are the ones who suffer the most?
Yeah, exactly. Think about those island nations, the ones that are barely above sea level. As the oceans rise, their homes are literally disappearing. Or countries that are already struggling with poverty, they're getting slammed by droughts and food shortages. They just don't have the resources to adapt to all these changes.
Wow, that's really unfair.
It is, and it raises some big questions about fairness, responsibility, and how we work together globally. It's not enough to just cut emissions. We also need to help those communities that are most vulnerable.
So it's not just about science and technology, it's about ethics and like doing the right thing.
Exactly. Addressing climate change. It has to be a holistic approach. We got to consider both the environment and how it affects people. It's about understanding that we're all connected and we all have a part to play in making things right.
That's a really powerful message.
It's a conversation we all need to be having.
Yeah, it's amazing like how everything's connected when it comes to this global warming thing. From the science of it to how it affects people and like the whole economy. It just shows how complicated this whole thing really is.
Yeah, there's no easy fix, that's for sure. We got to really think about this, look at it from different angles,
Yeah.
and, work together to find new and creative ways to deal with it.
It's good to see how much research is out there and how much effort people are putting into this. Like finding new technologies, changing policies, even just people getting out there and demanding action. It seems like everyone's starting to realize how urgent this is, how important it is to do something.
Definitely. There's a sense of urgency, for sure. And people are starting to realize we can't just try to stop it. We also have to get ready for what's already happening. Like, even if we cut emissions drastically, we're still going to see some changes. So we got to prepare for that.
That makes sense. We got to do both, right? Try to slow things down and also get ready for what's coming. It's kind of like trying to turn a giant ship. It takes time and effort, but it's got to be done.
That's a great analogy. And it shows how important it is for everyone to work together.
Yeah, we're all in this together, right?
Exactly. Individuals, governments, businesses, everyone's got to do their part.
It's like we're all crew members on this ship, and we got to make sure it stays afloat.
Exactly. And the more we know about global warming, the better decisions we can make. Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand, the better we can create a good future for, our kids and grandkids.
This deep dive has been awesome. I learned a ton. I get the science better now, the impacts, and all the different things people are trying to do to fix it. And it made me think about the whole social justice side of things, too, which I hadn't really considered before. It's definitely something I'm going to keep learning about.
That's great to hear. And remember, even small things you do can make a difference. Stay informed, talk to people about it, and don't be afraid to speak up and demand action. Every little bit helps.
So true. We all have a part to play. Hey, if you found this deep dive as interesting as I did, let us know. Maybe we can do another one focus on specific solutions or those policy debates, whatever you're curious about. The more we talk about this, the better prepared we'll be. All right, until next time, keep those brains buzzing.